Hello, welcome back to the Blue Workshop. My name is Sally Jo Michelson Cooper, and today I would like to talk to you about the first in my series of the Travelers, as well as introduction to my personal mythos. So this is a piece I've been working on. This summer I had the idea about a year ago. I'm very happy with how it turned out. It is a multimedia on wood under a really nice thick glaze, because when you do multimedia works there is some issues that could arise with flaking, so I wanted to just completely prevent that. Alright, so I'll begin to talk about my personal mythos and what it is and why it's important to me as an artist. So the idea of a personal mythos is something that was started by the Surrealists. Salvador Dali was really big on personal mythos. He used ants as a symbol for death and decay after death, because in his childhood he grew up along a beach and he observed ants eating dead things. So that's kind of how personal mythoses, just to give you an idea of how other artists have used them. For me, I, just this summer, since taking an art history class on surrealism, have really come to understand and realize that I have a personal mythos. It's very big piece of a lot of my paintings that aren't done as studies. I do a certain amount of paintings that I consider to be studies, like still lifes and stuff, just to learn how to paint better. But then my paintings like this one in the Travelers series are kind of an amalgamation of the skills I learned through studies and this inner narrative. And so I've been using this inner narrative since the beginning of painting and drawing. It's not that I really decide what things mean so much as I get the desire to draw something and I eventually, hopefully, understand what they mean. So I've started to try to write down and catalog different creations within my personal mythos. I'm doing this because part of going to a formal education and understanding how art gets interpreted, especially after you die, but even while you're alive, by art critics and other people, it concerns me because I see so many times artists being misrepresented and then having to plead that, no, that's not what I meant. Good example of this would be Georgia O'Keeffe and her Flower series, and there is a big group of art critics that refer to it as a reference to the female anatomy. And you could believe this. This seems plausible with the direction and the time frame and other artwork that was happening at the time, but if you read what Georgia O'Keeffe wrote in rebuttal, you come to realize, no, she just thought they were pretty. She did not want them to be a reference to the female anatomy. So that's a big concern of mine, just because I think as people, we, and humanity in general, not everything is a representation of sex. There are so many bigger concepts to be touched on. I'm not saying that I will never do pieces that might have a reference to that, but if I do, I won't be doing it secretly, and I won't be doing it subtextually. Well, maybe a little bit subtextually, just for the sake of not being vulgar, but that's not what a lot of my work is about. I believe there are really big, overreaching issues that have nothing to do with that. So, talking about my Travelers piece. My Travelers piece came to mind for me in a period of my life where within 2 years I had moved from Colorado, having several residences within Colorado. then I moved to DC. I did a brief stay in Afghanistan, and then I came back to DC, and then I moved to North Carolina, and now I moved to Illinois, all within 2 years. So traveling was really in my mind. Lots of places, lots of reasons. Also, change within my life was coming fast and furious. So during that time frame, the idea of this image came to me. I did an initial sketch of it, really liked the concept, and I'd just been saving it till a time where I could do it really big, really fresh, right from the beginning. The idea that it would be in a red setting, just with passion and otherworldly, came on. The two suns was kind of a later development. I wanted it to put it completely out of our solar system, just as far away and as otherworldly, while still giving it some references that could make you feel like you knew it. I really enjoyed trying to make the little metal structures, and then one of the details that I'm really happy with, I'll move you a little bit closer, is I did moving a computer cam is hard. I did a little electric line, which I thought gave unity to all the buildings, and plus just it makes it feel like, oh, so it's something people recognize as something familiar, as well as the little roofs and the little windows. So that was part of the backgrounds. Now, the travelers themselves, I did them in a very primitive style. And I wanted to kind of explain that because I didn't do it with an intent to be cultural appropriation. I did it for another cause. I view it that when you go to other places and you immerse yourself in another culture, in another place, you're somewhat of a primitive there because you don't know anything about that place, and that was kind of the concept behind it. Now, at the same time, I did make them carrying spears, and for me, it wasn't so much a symbol of weaponry. It's the idea of trying to be prepared with whatever means you have. So, if all you have is the ability to sharpen stones, a spear is a very practical weapon. It's not for hand-on-hand fighting, but if you're up against a larger adversary, it will give you an advantage. It's what you need. It's a very practical, basic weapon. Kind of a very human weapon, too. It's not... And by human, I guess I mean smart. That's what we have as humans, is skill. And that's more important than strength. It's more important than speed. Skill is what sets us apart as a species, and thinking, like deep thought. And the spear is a more advanced thing in the world of things that are simple, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So that's why I did them as primitives with spears. Also, I did them barefoot because it's a matter of gaining a connection to the place you're at, which, if anyone's walked around in their yard, it's a good feeling, but at the same time, it's a very vulnerable feeling, and I kind of wanted to express that. Now, moving forward, as I'm sure you have been questioning, because it's the most unusual part of this piece, the beast portal, which, it's kind of a unique way to use the beast for me. I've been using it for some time. The beast for me is a symbol for fear. And, well, I guess before I go into why it's a symbol for fear, I'll show you a couple of old versions. If you've seen my work before, which some of my friends have, they've seen the beast, and I've never really explained it before. I've kind of just allowed it to exist, and I've got some looks like, oh, that's a terrifying thing. Why are you doing that? Well, The beast is a symbol of fear. This is an older version of like an ominous beast. The reason I choose to portray fear as a beast is because of the consuming nature of fear. Fear doesn't just exist separately from you, it consumes you, it corrupts, it destroys other pieces of your life, not just during the experience of what you fear. It's an effect that affects every facet of your being. And that's why I've chosen to portray fear as a beast. Now, as I progress with using this symbol, I've used it in more than one way. This is an idea of traveling through fear, and I didn't really understand it when I first drew it, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Part of it is taken from an idea that I think I got from the Dune series, if you've read them. They're a science fiction book. And one of the little groups in the book, which is all women, which is maybe somehow it's related to this, but it's a group, and the woman says, "I will allow fear to pass through me." And that's the idea that, like, if you allow fear to pass through you, it can't affect you anymore once you've fully experienced it. And I kind of felt this way about loneliness too, which is something that I've dabbled in trying to express too, but it's not as solidified into a really solid, easy to explain thing yet. So that's why I'm doing the fear first. But so anyway, this one is about passing through fear, and when I first did it, I didn't really understand how the full expression of this idea, like instead of fear passing through you, you could pass through fear. And then later, I came up with this idea, which I'm hoping to do a bigger piece on, but this is one of my rough sketches, which it's really rough. But you get the idea. So I have this concept of fear being this double-sided monster, and in the center, you got kind of like a Stargate thing going on. And this is a metaphor of passing through what you're afraid of, and then stepping out of what you're afraid of into another world, which I think is a good metaphor for when we tackle those things in life that we're scared of. So that's how I ended up using it in this Traveler series. That's the idea that these people, and this is transferring a fiction into a reality so you can understand the fiction so you can understand the reality, which maybe is a step too far, I don't know. But the fiction of this is they have quite literally traveled through fear into another world. And that's a symbol for how people do that in their own lives, whether it's moving from one job to another, moving states, moving countries, moving relationships. People do that. They travel through fear into another reality. So that's the idea behind the Traveler series. And the reason that there are so many of them, in my mind, maybe not in how you want to experience it, but in my mind, they're all myself, and they're all myself doing it more than once. If that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. I've maybe said that too many times now. So, that is the beginning of my travels, and now I want to talk about one more thing. So this is an older version, well, not a version, but this is an older use of the fear symbol, and I don't actually like how this one turned out, which is why I didn't have this be the focus of this video. This is a version using fear, and this is actually kind of a version before the Travelers thing came to my mind. This is subduing fear. And here you can see I have fear to the side, and this is the first time I named him, and I gave him the tag in the 5 top languages that came up with Google at the time. And you can see this is a pretty involved piece because it's like a little one-frame story, so you have fear pinned here, and then you see something that's happened in the past. There's this gore scene here, you've got a hammer with small bloody handprints, and then you look up and you can realize what's been going on here is we have the rebuilt angel who has built her prosthetic with the tools that were available here, and that's part of what is in the dialogue. So I hope to redo it. I was unsatisfied because she was supposed to look like she was taking off, and that really, I have been somewhat unsuccessful in trying to get that to happen. But in this one, the way I used fear is fear was something that had to be subdued, whereas in the Travelers, it's kind of a life progression. Now fear is something that can be used. You can know where fear is, you can know that you can pass through it, and so there's a difference in reference. So I'm actually going to try and do, which is, it's complicated when you begin to understand your own work partway through it. Even though this is going to be one of hopefully a 4-piece set, I'm going to actually go back. Before I do the other 3 of this, I'm going to go back to something more simplistic. I'm probably going to do smaller, simpler pieces, but I want to do the original, which was the consumption of fear. And I think at the time, it was too real, and I couldn't finish it, and that's why it exists in a lot of little sketches. Fear existed just in a drawing by itself, because the idea of drawing the original emotion was too much. So if you know me, you might know when this fear icon kind of manifested for me, it was when I was in an abusive relationship. And that relationship happened for me when I was very alone and very young. And that's kind of how it solidified. So now that I'm away from that, and now that I'm in a good place, it's not so overwhelming to give it form. And giving it form, I find, is really helpful. I actually encourage anybody who's going through things to make a mythos about them and put them down and put them out of you. Because giving them form and giving them shape and putting them somewhere that's not just deeply inside of you, first of all, it makes them real and gives you validation, but then also it gives you distance. It gives you distance and it gives you an understanding of yourself, and that was the idea of developing a personal mythos. So I'm going to be working on a catalog of all my personal mythos. I'm going to be trying to make them available. I can't say how soon, because some of it I haven't really put into words myself, so it's kind of an effort to figure it out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a good understanding of what my Traveler series was about, and have a great day. Bye.